Testing 1, 2, 3. Den skal vel om at sidde heroppe. Og så skal faktisk på, så du holder den her. Sådan noget? Cool. Det er bare...
Hello and welcome to this first talk of this year. Before we start, I want to mention that us guys on the video team, we really want some new playing mates this year. We need 3 or 4 team members, and we will teach you everything you need to know. So you just need to have an interest for giving a hand and maybe doing a good job, and then I'll make sure you know the rest. If you want to join the video team or just want to hear more about it, then please come up to the video booth after the talk, and we'll have the initial meeting. And if you decide not want to join anyway, you are of course free not to join, but please do that. And I'll give the word to Flummer, who will talk about this year's Bornhack badge. Give him an applause.
Thank you. So for the next 30-45 minutes, we'll talk about the badge and a little about the process of getting to the badge that none of you have gotten yet, but hopefully we'll get fairly soon. So the first part will start with some of the crazy ideas that you sort of get after last time's Bornhack, and sort of we need to have the awesomest so on badge, and then you try things out and maybe you sort of adjust your expectations a little bit. I'll talk a little about some of the early prototypes, some of the experimentation we've done, and then move on to the final design that the badges that we have here. I'll go a little into the shitty add-on standards that we used on last year's badge, but this is the updated version. And then talk a little about the production and how we make these badges, and how this year's sort of process has been. We also look a bit up on the firmware, which is most likely where I think the majority of you guys will be playing around and hacking on it. We have a Git repository. It is right now empty, but it will maybe at the end of the talk there will be something in there. And then to sort of get you started, we have some ideas, challenges maybe that you can sort of move on. And then of course we will take questions also along the way. That's okay. So last year we had a badge with a little radio chip and the Happy Giga controller. It was a Bluetooth low energy radio. There was no screen. You had to add yourself if you wanted it. And it was fun, but I think some people sort of, it was a little bit to get started with it, and you had to sort of be into Bluetooth, I guess. Where the screen, having a screen on the badge, many people like that. And then also looking at the open source, what is happening in hardware right now. We have the RISC-V open source instruction set, and I wanted to have a badge with a RISC-V processor, of course. There's very few chips now. There are very limited amounts to choose from. So of course, probably sort of what you would do for that. And I guess Lattice ICE40 would be the right chip for that. It has open source tool chains and so on. And now we added a free color e-ink screen. E-inks is awesome for outdoor, and since we have yellow as the theme color, we should of course have a black, white, and yellow e-ink screen. But when, it's on the wish list. Have multiple stacked PCBs so we can hide the components on the inside, and of course, acrylic spacers to make it all sort of like a finished product. Controllable LED lights all out. We all love colored LEDs, but all these things. I guess one of them, you can sort of get that set up maybe at least for one piece, but when sort of you want to scale up, it starts to get a little sort of more problematic. So we tried some of the things out. I got some e-ink screens, and I fairly quickly found out that they are really slow when you want to do like a full screen update because it does some advanced sort of rotating these tiny little balls in the screens to get the yellow to get up and the black to be in the middle and so on. So updating these screens are really slow, and making a UI and navigation and so on is unlikely to be sort of at least easy. It might happen if you're really good, but so that was a kind of a bummer. E-inks are awesome for outdoor stuff because they are transflective. You don't need like light to compete with the sun. So that was a kind of a bummer. We also did some tests with these multiple layers of PCBs, but it takes a long time to laser cut, and we start to calculate, okay, we need so and so many batches, we need so and so many spacers because it needs to fit with the buttons and so on. It's just the amounts of stuff. It gets overwhelming, and if you calculate how much time it takes and how much it costs, it's at least for now, for the budget we have, it's out of reach. Also buttons. I found some buttons that can sit in between the PCBs with little holes, but the exact spacing it needed an extra layer of acrylic to not sort of actually work the buttons. So some of these ideas sort of got scrapped, spent a lot of time on it, but still, they have not ended up in this year's batch. Going on to the final design, sign out, he might be here somewhere, yeah. He found a screen in China. It's a very tiny screen. It's about 1 point something inches diagonal, but it has a lot of pixels. So it's 240 pixels by 240 pixels. It's full color, and it's showing pictures on this screen. It's really, really pretty. So we decided to make a batch with that sort of screen as the central part. I think a lot of you guys will find it nice to have a screen. You can make UIs, you can make graphics show on the screen, and I think that's a good thing for little games and so on. So that's sort of where we started out. The specs are the same Happy Gecko chip as the last 2 years. We have the bootloader, S-Meal awesome bootloader that mounts as a USB mass storage device. You can also use DFU. So that's the same chip, same tool chains, so easy to get going with. We also got a USB vid pit from the OpenMoko. So when they shut down, the USB vid pits are shared for open source projects. So the bootloader now uses that vid pit, so it doesn't sort of interfere with other devices and so on. And then the 240 by 240 pixel IPS screen. It's controlled over SPI. It's very similar to SPI, but they are doing some slightly weird things. And then since the Happy Gecko chip it's a small chip, it has I think it's 64K of flash with a 240 by 240 pixel screen. 64K of flash is not enough to have like a full screen, full color image. That'll take like more than double the space. So we added a micro SD card socket, so you can add in. We have tested with 16 gig cards and 500 meg cards and so on. So it seems to work fairly well. It's still the SPI communication, but it's we have had pretty good contact. I don't think I've found any cards that doesn't read. But that might the super high speed, the high capacity cards it won't work with. And then for gaming or just normal navigation, we've added a 5-way joystick and a bunch of side buttons. So you can use for menu navigation, controlling a little guy on a game or something like that. And then the joker that it works, but it's not perfect, is IR communication. So we have some sort of inter-batch stuff, so you can communicate with other batches, you can send data, you can receive data. That is one of the things that is slowing the finalization of the batches a little bit because we make some mistakes. There are also 3 little user LEDs, a red, a green, and a blue. So for debugging and so on, indication of what's happening and so on. That is a very easy way of. They just have an I/O, so you can toggle it up and down. You can do. I think also you can do PWM, right? On the LEDs, maybe. And then to get a steady voltage for both the screen and the SD card and other stuff on it, this year we have a boost chip. Last year we used just the batteries directly into the chip. It works fairly okay for the Happy Gecko, but when it comes to SD card and these, and also being able to drain the batteries fully, we have a boost chip that boosts the voltage up from the whatever voltage the batteries have up to 3.3 volts. I've tested with batteries that are like really, really low, and it still boosts up. But at the end, when the batteries are sort of starting to get low, the current will go up, and then at some point the batteries will crap out and say, okay, I don't want it anymore. It's powered by 2 AA batteries or via USB, similar to the previous years. It's auto switching, so you can have the batteries in and you just plug the USB in, and then it will power from USB instead. There's one thing is that if you don't have batteries in and have USB connected, then it's only powering the whole thing via the built-in voltage regulator that sits in the Happy Gecko chip, and that is like a very tiny one. So when you insert an SD card and sort of start to initialize that, it will actually reset the chip because the voltage drops like momentarily. And so if you have batteries in there, it won't happen. A few images we had. I've shared some of these on Twitter also. We have a micro SD card holder and the little 5-way connector and the side buttons at the side are not little LEDs. Moving on to the shitty add-ons. This standard was started, I think, about 2 years ago. And last year at DEF CON, it like blew up. There was like a lot of shitty add-ons. It was the most simple way of making an expansion port. So it was just 4 pin headers, 2x2. And it worked. It did what it was supposed to do. It make it really, really easy to make add-ons to batches instead of having to make a whole batch, because that takes some time. It takes a lot of time. And producing the things. So having an add-on, you can make simple things. You can make just something that lights up, mostly artwork and so on. So that worked very well, but the 2x2 pins were a little fragile. You could put them in like 4 different ways. Half of them, or at least, were shorting stuff out. So that was sort of less than ideal. So this standard has added 2 more pins, making it 2x6. And also made a definition for how to have the connector so that the connector is keyed, so you can't put it in upside down. The connector having the key and the shrouding on the add-on side also adds in stability so that the add-on sits better on the batch. But otherwise, it's backwards compatible, so it still has the I2C lines and VCC and ground. And then there's 2 GPIOs that can be used for like controlling LEDs or something like that, or indication or inter-communication between the batch and the add-on. And those are routed to the PD6 and PD7 on the Happy Gecko controller. It's backwards compatible with V1, so you can add a V1 add-on onto a V1.69 BIS standard batch. So the same 4 pin, you just have to put it in correctly. Key connector all there for mechanical strength. And that connector is almost impossible to get because this type of connectors are normally used where you have the male part on a PCB and then you have a cable going. But there was a guy who found a place in China and he bought a lot of them, and I bought some for this batch from him. So I think they actually made them to order. Because this is almost impossible. They are hugely expensive, even on eBay. But there will be one on each batch. Production-wise, we have Last year we started having production in China, so all the tiny parts, the SMD parts, they are put on the PCB in China. In 2017, we tried hand assembling batches. We did it in Labitat. We made it like a sweatshop. It was fun for the first 10, and then it sort of went down. It's not fun doing production amounts of batches by hand. It's a lot of work. Half of them will not work the first when you get through the line. You have to fix it afterwards. So that's kind of annoying. And when we sort of ramp up in the amounts, you have to go to China. It's very cheap, but the tricky thing you run into is component sourcing. And if you think it's difficult to get stuff into Denmark and you have to pay tax if it's more than 80 kroners and so on, getting stuff into China is equally difficult, and it takes time. We got started way too late with this production stuff for this year. And the component sourcing part, they actually told exactly how long they needed. And I kind of just forgot and got the submission of sending the stuff out to them was too late. It would not make it to the beginning of Bornhack now. But I had to submit. I had gotten prototypes. We had assembled them. We had also tested some of the things on the prototypes. But some things we just hadn't gotten to when we had to send them to production. So after they were actually ordered, we found issues with IR. The sending worked so-so, but the receiving did not work at all. Nothing was going in. So when you have boards already produced, we have components always already inbound for the factory. It's a little tricky how to fix that because we can't really change the boards. They are already produced. And the parts, we kind of have to manually assemble those. So what we ended up doing is buying another part for the receiver. The photodiode that we have found ended up producing way too weak signals for the other circuit we had, so actually pick it up. So I found a photo transistor instead with way more sort of output range, and we managed to actually fix one of our prototypes by replacing two parts. One is the photo transistor, and the other one is a little resistor in the sort of the circuit that receives the signal. And we convinced the Chinese factory to produce the battery very fast, but without these two components populated. So we could just got them along with the batches. The Chinese factory did the source part, component sourcing. They can't really change that. It's Chinese customs that is the most problematic part. A lot of the parts they actually source inside in China. That works very well. They get them very fast. But when it comes to the boost converter and all these like special parts that are where I specify it needs to be this brand, otherwise it probably won't work. They have to get them from the like the US or something like that, and that takes time getting in. They got the last part on Friday. That's like a week ago. So that was where they began production. They said like 3 to 4 days for production. So that would be Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. But they actually, I got a tracking number on Monday, so they actually shipped them out on Monday from China, and I had them picked up at the DHL warehouse here in Taulau yesterday morning. So they did a fantastic job of actually pushing this job through the production line way faster than they normally do. So thank you very much for that. The final assembly process, they came without these two tiny little SMD parts, and they came without the screen mounted, without the battery holders and the shitty add-on connector mounted. Last night, a bunch of volunteers, they pushed me to put them to work, and they actually sorted up a lot of these parts. They worked for hours. They put up a whole little production line. A big thank you to them. There is still a little bit of stuff to do, but hopefully we will have batches ready late today or maybe early Saturday, but I hope for late today. There should be batches for at least the ones who have arrived today. Sorry for the delay. I had hoped they would be ready here, but sadly not. When it comes to firmware, maybe Emil will also add in a little bit here and there. But yeah, it's the same bootloader with mass storage. So you press the boot button when you have it plugged into USB. It shows up as a mass storage device. It's a tiny little one of 64K size. You simply drag over a code.bin file, and then it will reprogram the flash. And when you unmount the drive, it will reset the chip and start your code instead. It also has DFU if you want to run command line and then just call the DFU to utility. And then it will also program if you don't want to press the button and so on. Esmil has made a little menu system so that you can, when you get the badge, it has a logo, and then with using the navigation button, you can move up and down and start little applications. The first one being actually the schedule for all Bornhack, so you have the schedule on your badge. It's similar to the one we had in 2017, but designed and made to fit the screen we have here. It's as of earlier today, so if there are changes, of course, they don't trickle down. There's also a button test program. We use that for production to test that all the buttons work, but it can also be used as an example program if you want to look at and make your own sort of gaming or whatever. There's a little BMP viewer program that can read images from the SD card. You can actually browse images. So a FAT32 formatted SD card, it can read files. It'll be in the 8.3 format on the screen. But you can select the file, a BMP file, and when you select it, it'll show that on the screen. So a very easy way to customize your badge and add little bling and your own stuff.
About the BMP parser, so you need to make the right BMP files. It needs to be 24-bit colors and no run-length encoding or compression or anything like that. Otherwise, it won't work. So if you're up for it, you're very welcome to extend the parser so that you can show black and white images and compressed BMPs and stuff like that. Also, I used I didn't write the FAT library myself, but the FAT library that I'm actually using also supports exFAT, apparently. I just didn't test it yet. So it should also work for really big SD cards if you're up for it.
Awesome. And then there's also a simple infrared receive and send program that can send like characters. It's simply sending UART signals to the IR diode and then sending that signal, and same with the receiving. It's very slow. It's like 1200 baud, So it's super slow, and it needs to be very close so you can't spy on your neighbors. Making a bug into a feature. The whole the firmware is built with separate files, so if you want to extend that firmware, you can add another file and add it to the menu, and then you have your own little app inside there. And the dream is to have, when you make awesome things, you can share them. So making pull requests to the GitHub repo, that's where the software will be, firmware will be.
As soon as I have commit rights to it.
Yeah. So it'll end up there. You can clone it. There's guides to how to install the toolchain. And then, making cool apps, making a pull request, then we can add it in there, and everybody can you can share the app that way. We made a list of some project ideas to get people started. Games is, of course, an obvious thing with the joystick and the color screen. Snake, we saw Snake at the 2016 batch, no, 17 batch. It was using just a single pixel. Maybe we should have like bigger Snake moving around, because the single pixel one would be really, really thin. Space Invaders could also be an idea, or maybe like a two-player shooting game, sitting close to each other with infrared communication. Could be an idea. And of course, other formats passing for images. GIF is a little advanced, I think, but but of course, it would be awesome to see like an animated GIF, but the refresh of the screen is not like super fast. It's running fairly slow, so you would need to do some tricks, maybe lower resolution, not doing the full screen, something like that, if you would have animations that actually sort of looked smooth. But it could be cool to see that. Also, QR code generation could be fun. Either showing QR codes, getting data in maybe via IR, something like that. Maybe even communication via QR codes, I don't know. Could also do like V-card exchange, have a little V-card on the SD card, you can send it out to other people and receive SD cards. And also, IR, the current version of the IR communication is very simple, it's just sending stuff out and hopefully the receiver will get something that looks right. So having checksum, maybe two-way sending back and forth and so on, could be interesting. And of course, for those who want to play with hardware, I would love to see the Star Wars theme playing on the badge some way with adding stuff. I have some breakout boards. If people want to play with that and have an awesome project, I'd be happy to give out little stuff here and there. I think we made it to questions.
Do we have any questions? No questions? That was apparently a complete talk then. A round of applause for the badge team.
Yep. I'll stick around here for 15 minutes. I'll have my prototype of the badge, and I have some of the early prototypes. So if people want to sort of look with their hands, they're welcome. I'll sit on one of the first tables here. So this is my prototype. So I think it's run out of battery, right? But this is what you will get hopefully later today. And some of the prototypes I made is with the sandwich construction, having multiple PCBs and little buttons in there. But yeah, it takes a lot of times, a lot of little tiny screws, a lot of little spacers, and price versus what you would get out of it is a lot of money going into manufacturing these things and not really gaining anything in a sort of using them way. And then I made these little add-ons that follows the shitty add-on standard. It's just protoboards. So if you have some stuff you want to add on there, I have some of these to give out.
Quite, I have two small messages. First of all, the video team is meeting up right after this talk. So if you are already on the video team, or if you want to join, or just want to hear about it, it's in this corner in like 2 minutes. Second of all, we are having this game show. I don't remember when.